Hello, everyone. This is Katie Ward, the Executive Director of the Arizona Coalition of School Board Members, and I'm excited to be speaking with Matt Beienburg today. Matt is the Director of Education Policy at the Goldwater Institute and a member of the coalition. We're working with him to get curriculum transparency passed here in Arizona, so thank you so much for talking to me today, Matt.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. All right, so my first question is Senate Bill 1211, which is the Curriculum Transparency Act that's being sponsored by Senator Bartow. What can you tell me about the bill? How did it come about? What's the background on how this originated?
Sure, yeah. SB 1211, as you mentioned, sponsored by Senator Bartow, essentially is a solution to the problem that parents have been talking about now for several years of saying, hey, we want to be involved with our kids' education and have access to the kinds of materials that are being used in the classroom. And so we saw, we've seen so many parents come out, share their stories about having difficulty being able to see, what should be a pretty straightforward request, the content that's being used in the classroom that their students will encounter. And so 1211 essentially provides a legislative fix to say, hey, right now the statutes that are in place, they're not doing it. So Arizona, for instance, actually has laws on the books that say parents have the right to review learning materials and activities in advance. That's an Arizona law. But then it doesn't say anything about really how that's going to get implemented in most cases, right? So there's laws that say, yeah, a parent's allowed to drive down to a school district office building and see some of the resources there. But most parents, right, who are working during the day or taking care of their kids, having to drive down to a district HQ in the middle of the day just to get a basic sense of what's there is not feasible for so many of these parents. And so what we've heard is parents who are saying, look, I'd like something that's an easier way for me to engage with the material, to know, what is my incoming student going to encounter? What is my kid going to see as they go through this next year's classroom? And so SB 1211 includes multiple provisions in it, but the main piece of it is saying, we're in the 21st century, let's make access to the content being used in the classroom available to parents. And so it essentially says each public school will post on its website a list of the actual materials that are being used. And so that can be done as simply as using a Google Doc, and essentially just says, within 7 days after you use these materials, post them. Just simple identifying information, similar to posting a syllabus or a bibliography. This is the kind of thing we already have teachers submitting their lesson plans to their principals, to their staff. Under the bill, they can simply just reuse those exact same lesson plans if they would like to, and document it with that. So it basically provides maximum flexibility so that they can make clear what is being taught. And so the bill essentially just codifies that. It says, again, you have 7 days after you use it. Doesn't prevent a teacher from finding some great material that morning or the day before if they'd like to use it. Just simply post it on the website afterwards. It does have a provision for a narrow set of subjects, things on race, gender, discrimination, action civics, that kind of thing, that says, yes, you would, those are issues that warrant a little bit more notification. So under the bill, those materials that are being used would be posted 72 hours beforehand. So, but everything else essentially post very basic information about it. You have 7 school days afterwards to get it up on the website. The bill does have a few other provisions in it that help kind of cement some of the protections that parents have in terms of then accessing the materials themselves. So if they see something on the website and they have questions about it, to make sure that they can go to the school building and not have to, again, drive to the other part of the district, that they're able to access that, briefly before or after class, the school hours, when class ends as well. Making sure that the schools aren't blocking parental access to those materials, to say you have to have in place, if you're going to be contracting for copyrighted materials, you have to have some provision in place where the parent's able to come see that at the school, or else provide, it can be a temporary login credential for the parents to access if it's a sort of digital type of resource. But essentially saying, look, if you're using this content, there's no reason that, given all the resources that are out there, that we should be picking materials and then saying, sorry, you're not allowed to see this as a parent. So the bill basically takes care of all that. Does have a provision in there to ensure that the schools follow this. It says that if a school fails to post the materials online, the parents are able to go to the principal, try and get that resolved. If they still aren't able to get that taken care of, they can go to the governing board. They get a chance to take care of the issue, and only then would a parent be able to then pursue legal action, not against the teacher, but to enforce at the district level to say, hey, you need to make sure that this is being listed on there. So great bill. We're excited to support it. We appreciate Senator Bartow for running with it, and glad to have support from folks like the coalition as well.
Yeah, no, we agree. It's a great bill. We're really excited to have it. And so, the legislative process can be a little confusing for some people. We had the pleasure of going down to the Senate on Tuesday to testify on behalf of the bill and hear parents and other people discussing what this bill would mean to them. And so maybe can you talk a little bit about where we are in the process of getting this bill passed?
Sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, it was heard just this week, the Senate Education Committee, and it passed, which was fantastic to see. We had parents lined up giving testimonies about the experiences that they've had. I think we saw the members of that committee, including some educators themselves, who said, "Look, I post my materials online at the start of the year. This is something that actively promotes, engagement and collaboration between parents, teachers, students." And I think some of the members pointed out that, look, this is something that we've been hearing from the education community, that don't worry about it. Yeah, maybe there's a problem, but we'll fix it. And that same kind of talking point of like, well, let's not actually really do anything about it, has kind of worn thin a little bit. And so we saw the committee say, all right, it's time to take action. This is a solution. This seems like it's a good balance that provides that information in a way that's kind of streamlined. And so we saw that committee advance that through into the next stage.
Yeah, I think someone brought up that they've tried to get a bill passed like this for the past 4 years. So, that's an interesting talking point that there hasn't been time to come up with a different solution when it's been in discussion for 4 years. So, anyway, if you would like to maybe elaborate on the legislative part. So, it's gone through Senate Education. So, what's the next step? And maybe kind of guide us through the process of how this bill would become law here in Arizona.
Sure. Yeah, so it goes through the committee process there. Typically, they'll then be heard through a rules committee, essentially just kind of looking at the technical aspects, and then it would go to the full Senate. So the full Arizona State Senate would have a chance to vote on this, presuming that they also, again, many of the members who are in that education committee are obviously then would be voting on it as a part of that entire Senate body. They would advance that, and then it would move over to the Arizona House. And so at that case, you would then kind of go through a similar process. It would be heard in the committee. Members would have a chance to discuss that again. We'd hear testimonies on that, again, from parents, teachers, the community. And then similarly, if that advances at that point, it would again go to the full House of Representatives here for Arizona. If it passes there, then it would be sent to the governor's desk, and he'd have the opportunity to sign it. And we did hear Governor Ducey did say during his State of the State address, explicitly actually mentioned the idea and the need for curriculum transparency or academic transparency, to say, look, we've got the tools and the technology to do it. So I think that we're seeing a lot of support, from members, from folks in the education community, and including the governor himself. So I think this has got a bright future ahead of it, and yeah, excited to see it move through the process.
Yes, and I think that it should, hopefully. What do you think the impact of curriculum transparency will be for parents and students all across the whole state and the country? I know that there's bills, I believe, in 20 other states that have similar topics of curriculum transparency that are being introduced all over nationwide.
Yeah, yep. As you said, about 20 states now have rolled out legislation, obviously all crafted a little bit differently, but all trying to get at this basic underlying principle of saying, let's not make parents, drive down and submit expensive public records requests, which is what we're seeing. And so in terms of the impact, I think that's one of the immediate things you'll see. Of parents would no longer be told, yeah, if you want to know what's being taught, you can hope that some of the content after the fact will come home with your student in their backpack. But if you want to actually kind of see what kind of content is being taught at the schools near you, what your student is going to expect to encounter, right now the solution a lot of times is, well, submit a public records request and you can see the materials that are used, even just to get a basic sense of what they are. And so with the transparency piece, parents will immediately know and be able to see, all right, this is the list of content that's being used. And then if they have a question about a particular resource, right, that's, again, as I kind of alluded to, then they can have that conversation with a teacher, instead of right now, if they say, well, I'm concerned and I'd like to know, what are you teaching when it comes to issues of, you say anti-racism, does that mean Ibram Kendi's book, which says that we should be actively discriminating against people on the basis of race? What sort of materials are under that? Because right now, what we see a lot of times is schools will post online, maybe a curriculum, or they'll say, well, the state standards are already online. These sort of broad outlines in terms of the content that's being taught is very different from, well, what are the actual materials being used to teach it? And so once this legislation passes, parents will immediately be able to see, okay, I see that you're actually assigning the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, individual works, as opposed to just, yeah, we're going to discuss, American history or this era, and actually we're going to use the 1619 project to teach it. The parents can see that and identify and say, maybe we've got some questions and some concerns about that. So I think that will immediately make that process easier for parents. And even in terms of teachers, while the teachers unions themselves are adamantly opposed to this, because organizations like the ACLU have come out and said this would make it harder for us to push our agenda when it comes to race and gender. If parents can see that content, right, and if that content is questionable, as they say, sunlight's the best disinfectant. So teachers unions, which the National Education Association, which our Arizona branch kind of aligns with, have explicitly come out and said, we support academic frameworks being formed by tools such as critical race theory. I mean, they have gone on record explicitly using terms like critical race theory, saying we support this in the classroom. And so something like the transparency provisions here would say, all right, let's see what it is that you're putting in there. And then, parents can actually see it. So the teachers unions obviously want to have it both ways. They want to push the politics in the classroom while then saying that there's nothing there to see. So they've made that point. I think they also try to say, this is too difficult for our teachers to do, right? We couldn't possibly, it's unimaginably burdensome. And that's a talking point that they've tried to use, even at the same time that they have in the past testified and said, well, look, we're professionals and we submit our lesson plans. We're already documenting everything. We're already fully transparent, which, kind of asks the question, well, if you are documenting this and you're able to, as you've shown and others have, why is it that just the curriculum coach or the principal is allowed to see this? Let's let parents, let's let others see it. And even teachers would benefit, right? So if you're a new teacher coming into the system, right now the expectation in a lot of cases is you need to go find materials on your own to use. And as we've mentioned a few times, national studies where teachers themselves are surveyed and they report saying we spend an average of 4 hours every week just searching for materials to use in the classroom. So we're leaving our teachers to Google and scour the internet for content when we could be having them look at what other great teachers are using, right? You could say, oh, I know this school is fantastic. I know this teacher over here might be great, and be able to see that sort of content. And we've actually even seen sort of representatives of the establishment oppose the bill on those grounds because they don't like that idea of content being shared amongst the teachers. It's sort of a turf war. And so I think this will have a positive benefit to actually make less work for teachers by being able to see what others are doing instead of reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it would be incredible to have this resource for parents, and it would be great for students as well. There would be a lot less confusion. There would be people who like me are nerds and like to get ahead and like to see what we're going to be doing. Those kinds of things are important for people to be able to access. So it's going to be incredible when we can get this done. So that leads me to my final question for you. How can the people who are passionate about transparency in our students' curriculums get involved to make sure that this bill passes?
Yeah, great question. Several ways that they can. It's making clear that this is something, as those, I would say, fairly brave parents who stood up and testified, contacting lawmakers, letting them know that this is something, whether it's sharing the experiences that they've had. Obviously our system, our state government here is fantastic, allows members of the public to sign in support, to come down and testify on behalf of it, to share their stories. And I think just getting that message out. And so that's I think the most important thing for folks to do is to be able to say, you actually can participate. This isn't Washington, D.C. This is our local state government here, to be able to make your voice heard and say, yeah, look, I want to know what's being taught to my kids in our public schools and to have access to this information. And so, Senate Bill 1211, we've already seen, a lot of support for it and getting more folks to express that and move this across the finish line.
Yes, and we at the coalition are helping people sign up to use the Request to Speak system. So if you're watching this and you're interested in going in and giving SB 1211 a thumbs up on RTS and expressing your public comment when it goes to the committee in the Senate, because I believe you can only use that platform when it's in committee, correct? I think that's right.
The chance to testify.
You could give it a thumbs up, yeah. So, and that will be the opportunity for you to issue public comment. So if you have questions about that, feel free to email me. My email is katie@azcoalition.org. Thank you so much, Matt, for talking to me today about SB 1211. It's so important. Is there anything in closing that you would want to make sure people know about the bill? If there's one thing, what's the thing?
The thing is that this will empower parents. It'll help students. It'll help parents. It'll help teachers. It'll bring transparency where we currently do not have it.
Awesome. Well, let's work, and we'll get Senate Bill 1211 passed, the Curriculum Transparency Act. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.